Welcome back to another episode of the Better Than I Found It podcast, the podcast all things college golf. You're listening to Mike McGraw, the men's golf coach at Baylor. Today's guest is five-time PGA Tour winner Danny Edwards. Danny, who grew up in Edmond, Oklahoma, is a good friend of mine from way back. He's a little bit older than I am, but he played the tour for many, many years, but was also a competitive race car driver. He's got so many interesting things about his career. He was a great athlete. Danny was just an unusual guy that played the tour. He's also written a book recently that he's going to tell us about today. So I really look forward to this interview, and I know you will too. All right, everybody, please join me in welcoming five-time PGA Tour winner Danny Edwards to the Better Than I Found It podcast today. Danny, thanks for being here.
Oh, it's great to visit with you, Mike. It's great to catch up.
Absolutely. You know, we don't get to see each other as much as we used to back in the day, but, being a young kid who grew up in Oklahoma like you did, but I was a huge Oklahoma State fan when I was a boy. So obviously you and Mark Hayes and Greer Jones and Mike Holder and just all those players in the late 60s, early 70s were big to me. So this is an interview I've been looking forward to having for a while.
Oh, great. I look forward to it since we communicated to. There's a lot of great stories.
Absolutely. Well, listen, I have a question. How does a young boy from Ketchikan, Alaska, which is where you were born, I believe, how does that guy end up playing the PGA Tour? So we're gonna get to that in a second, but you have to admit your junior golf career was atypical. It wasn't normal. The way you got into the game, the way you came up in the game, the fact you were a multi-sport athlete and not really a golfer to start with. It's not, congruent with what you would think a guy who's going to win 5 times on the PGA Tour would eventually do. So having said that, there wasn't even a golf course in the town you grew up in Edmond, Oklahoma. That didn't happen until you were a sophomore in college. So tell me how all of this came about. How did this happen?
Well, it's really an interesting story. I was a kid, Mike, that just loved sports. I was a sports guy. I watched it on TV. I started playing baseball in the second grade and basketball even in the second grade, just junior peewee baseball and basketball. And sports was really my life. That's what my life revolved around, whether it was running a foot race or climbing a tree. I wanted to be the fastest to get to the finish line or the fastest to get to the top of the tree. So basketball and baseball was good. But when I came across golf over on the old high school football field at Edmond High School, there was just something different about golf. Mr. E.C. Hafer, the retired football coach who now has a beautiful sports park named after him, motioned for me one day when I was riding my bicycle to come over, and I rode over there by where he was with a couple other kids. And he said, what's your name? I said, Danny. He said, do you want to hit some golf balls? And that was the start of it. And honestly, from those first couple of balls that I hit, I'm not going to say captivated by the first experience, but with the second or third, I said, this is something that I like. So I just started to watch, and it turns out that my best buddy at the time, who lived on the other end of the block there on Myrtle Drive, was Paul Walters, and he and his father were golfers. And so I asked Paul one day, shortly after I first hit those balls, what he was doing. I kind of knew. He said, well, I'm playing golf. He said, I'm actually practicing. I'm not really playing. You play on a golf course, blah, blah, blah. So I started to first sneak into the neighbor of mine's garage, Mr. Bill Eichscheid, who was the Pontiac dealer in Edmond, because I had noticed when his garage door was up, there was a set of clubs over in the corner, and they were always in the same place. So I figured he probably wasn't using them too much. So I asked his son if I could get one of those clubs and hit some balls. So I'd hit some balls around the neighborhood yards and got really brave after a few weeks to go over a roof or two. But of course, I had no idea of what a golf course really was. But I started to watch a little bit on television, and I really was just captivated by the feeling of swinging that club and the contact of a golf ball. So I asked for a set of clubs for Christmas of 1965, and we were going down to one of her brother's homes down there, and he had a gun shop and a merchandise store and whatnot, and she had given him $20 to find me a set of golf clubs. So I got the set, and I hadn't played on a golf course, but I had gone up to that practice field at the college and the high school, any place I could find. I mean, I got thrown off of more parks and football fields and baseball fields in Edmond, Oklahoma that anybody can imagine. But I got pretty well familiar with the idea, of the woods and the irons. And so we go down to Burnett, Texas for Christmas. And my dad takes me out to the golf course after I get my set of clubs, set of Wilson staff golf clubs to play 9 holes. I played 9 holes. I shot about 43. That's the number I remember. And when we came back in after playing, the pro said there, well, did you guys have fun? I said, yeah, we loved it. It was great. It was just me. My dad just walked around. He didn't even play. He said, what'd you shoot? And I said, well, I shot 43 for 9 holes. I had no idea whether that was good or bad. He said, well, how long have you been playing golf? And I said, this is my first time on a golf course. He looked at me like I was from Mars. And so that was it from the start. So I went, coach, played basketball then in the spring, but one in the winter. And then when spring came, I was going out for the golf team instead of playing baseball. And my buddy, Billy Mike Thompson, asked me one time, he said, Danny, you're going to play baseball, are you, this spring? I said, no, I'm going to play golf. He said, you're out of your mind. What are you doing? You're a good baseball player. You're out of your mind. I said, I don't care. I love this golf. I'm playing golf. So that's the start. And it continued.
That's crazy.
Right from there, our high school golf team then that spring I went out for. I think there were only 6 players that went out, and I made the 5th place guy. We went down to a course in Oklahoma City called Eastern Municipal Golf Course. Cost 25 cents to play. You kind of took your life in your own hands when you went down there. There were oil derricks and stickers. We called them goat heads on the fairways. There wasn't really much grass, but that was the first course I really played. And I qualified 5th man, made it my first match. I don't even remember for sure if I won my first match, but I got challenged by one of the other older guys and he beat me and I was absolutely decimated, practiced real hard and then challenged him for the next match and beat him by about 10 shots. And he never challenged me again. So I was good to go there. And I started my career with Edmond High School playing golf.
Well, I have a question now. That was kind of a modest start, if you will, pretty modest. 4 years later, you win the state high school championship. 3.5 years later, you win the state high school championship for Edmond. And I guess most people, and you and Paul Walters won the state 2-man, as I recall. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, we did.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a pretty heady start for a young man that really hadn't been in the game. You were a basketball player more than you were a golfer. I think you scored 41 points in the state high school playoffs at one point.
Yeah, actually 42. I still have the Edmond High School scoring record. It stood for 53 years. 40. It was either 42 or 43. Someone looked it up recently and said it was 43, but whatever it was, it's still there.
That's amazing. And it's not like you're this giant either. You're not a big guy. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. But, Mike, when I played basketball, my credo was to win every single wind sprint, every single time we ran the stairs. Nobody ever beat me in a foot race. I was there till the lights were turned off at night, shooting baskets because it it was just always my credo, if you will, that I was going to be and never have to look back and say, gee, I wish I would have worked a little harder here. I would have worked a little harder there. So with that philosophy and the God-given athleticism that I was blessed with, I made a lot of progress. So within my junior year, I'm shooting, scores that are in the mid 70s. We got to play in the Oklahoma City Open Pro Junior. Played with Harold Henning. I'll never forget it. And then, as you say, Paul and I won the team, the Oklahoma City thing. We won the Oklahoma City 4-ball our senior year. Beat Mark Hayes and Larry Hayes in the final. Wow. So, and of course, there wasn't one person in Oklahoma City who was betting on Paul Walters and Danny Edwards to 4-ball. I could tell you that. So it was a pretty meteoric rise all the way then to winning that state high school golf championship at Lakeside in Stillwater.
You did win it there. And I'm going to guess that that's probably where Labrinth Harris discovered you, because wasn't like he was out on the recruiting trail every week. So tell me about how the recruiting process went with Labrinth. Did it start right there at the state high school?
It really did. I mean, when I got there, Mike, for the tournament, I wouldn't have given 5 cents that he knew who I was. Never heard from him, never got a letter or anything from him. But I walked up onto the first tee of our first, we played 36 holes the first round. And Coach Harris looked over at me and said, "Hi, Danny, how are you?" And my knees started shaking. And he said, "Listen," he said, "I want you to come to Oklahoma State and play golf for the Cowboys." He said, "I'm going to a tournament. I won't get to see you finish up tomorrow, but when I get back, I'll get a hold of you and I want you to come up here and show you around Oklahoma State. We want you to play for the Cowboys." Well, I was on cloud 9 because I didn't even know he knew who I was. I shot 74, 75, or 75, 76. It was one of those horrible windy days. Hadn't really played Lakeside, so didn't know it. But I was in about, I don't know, 3rd or 4th place, something like that. And then the next round, we had just one round, and I shot 68, which was 3 under, I believe, 3 or 4 under, and just blew away the field. I ended up going from 3rd or 4th to winning I think I won by 6 shots, actually. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't wait, Mike. I couldn't wait to imagine Coach getting up the next morning and seeing me winning the tournament and shoot that 68. Boy, he's going to want me to come to Oklahoma State. I just couldn't wait till he called me. And so sure enough, he did. He called me in a few days and said, "Come on up. I want to show you around Oklahoma State." So I got up there. We went out to the golf course. He showed me around Iba Hall, the dorms there, the athletic dorms. And so he went back out and he says, "Danny," he said, "listen," he said, "we've got a lot of great players here at Oklahoma State." He said, from all over the country. He said, "if you really work hard, you got a chance to make the team by your junior year." And I about fainted. I thought to myself, I didn't say anything, but we got back in the car, drove home, and I was in shock, really. I thought, not play till my junior year? You've got to be kidding. Not that I thought I was a great player or anything, Mike. It was just the idea of not playing on the team was just completely foreign to my thinking. Mm-hmm. So I went back as we drove home and with Mom, and I just thought to myself, well, school was starting in about 2 or 3 weeks. I thought, the only thing I have control over is how hard I work, and I'm going to work harder than everybody else on the team. Yeah. And so I did. And so the first qualifying that fall was for a couple of tournaments. We went, I think, to Columbia, Missouri, and then we went to the Fall Buckeye Classic, where the NCAA is this year at the Scarlet course. And I shot the lowest qualifying score of the whole group. When I went in the East room, there must have been 30 guys in there. I couldn't believe how many guys were in there. And I shot the low score. I think I shot a 68, 69, another pretty windy. I played with Mark Hayes and was low qualifier. I then got to go to the tournament in Columbia. And I got to go to the tournament, the Fall Classic up there at Ohio State, and I finished third overall. I was low Oklahoma State player as a freshman and third in the team. Houston was there, a bunch of the big schools. I was looking at those guys on putting green on one of the practice rounds, and Mark comes over to me and says, "Who are you looking at?" I said, "Mark, I'm looking at those Houston guys. That's John Mills, and that's Corker DeLoach, and that's these guys." And he said, "Hey, they put their pants on the same way as we do. Get over here and practice." So I thought I was in pretty good shape, finishing third in that tournament and beating all the other players on the team to go to the springtime. So that was really how it all started off, Mike.
Well, it didn't end too poorly either. You, in college, I'm just going to give you a few stats here. I'm sure you remember every bit of this, but you were North and South amateur champion. You were a Big 8 champion 2 years, I believe. You were an All-American 2 or 3 years, first team All-American, and low amateur in the Open Championship at Troon. So your amateur career and your college career, that didn't look like a little kid who grew up without a golf course either. So
it probably
absolutely were a quick learner.
Well, there's some great things in there. You know, the Big 8 championships were a lot of fun. I actually won it my sophomore and junior year, and my senior year it came back, and I got real mad because they didn't change the pins for the first round of the tournament, and I just didn't have the patience to take that in. I thought I was hotter than I really was, and so I ended up finishing second or third, but or I'd have won it 3 years in a row. But you know, the amateur tournaments were great. I won the Southeastern and the Pinehurst tournament. Was just a fantastic event there. Beat Eddie Pierce in the 36-hole final, and that was just a major accomplishment for me, amateur wise. And of course, my trip to the British Open in 1972 at Lytham St. Anne's was spectacular. I wasn't going to get to go because I didn't have the money to go. So I was out at the golf course at Kicking Bird, and Art comes over to me, Art Proctor, and says, "Danny, you're going to be out here tomorrow? You're going to go? Are you going to go to the British Open?" I said, "Art, I can't afford to go." He said, "You going to be out here tomorrow?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Be here around 12 o'clock. I want to introduce you to somebody." So I got out there, and he says, "Shake hands with Dr. Rex Kenyon." Said, "Nice to meet you, Dr. Kenyon." So Dr. Kenyon says, "Well, Danny, Art tells me you'd like to go play the British Open over in Scotland." I said, "Oh, I'd love to go play the British Open." Boy, what an experience. He said, "How much do you think it would cost?" And I said, "Well, I can't afford to go. I don't know." He says, well, how much do you think it would cost to go?" Well, I had really no earthly idea. I mean, I figured 2 weeks over there, got to fly over there. That's a few $100. Got to get a hotel to stay, got a caddy, I got food. I just threw out the number $500. I didn't know, which was a pretty good chunk of money in 1972. But so Dr. Kenyon looks at Art and looks back at me and says, "Danny, I want you to go play and qualify for the..." This man, this doctor I haven't known him for 15 minutes, and he's offering to give me $500 to go try to qualify for the British Open. You got to be kidding. So I headed out to Scotland, Ayrshire, Scotland. There were 4 courses, 125 players at each course for 24 spots. I was the third low qualifier at my course, so I'm in the British Open. So I go out to register that morning, the next morning at Lytham St. Anne's. I get it mixed up. It was Lytham St. Anne's, I think, and then Royal Troon the next year, or the other way around. I'm not.
No, you got it correct. That's correct.
Okay. So I go out to the golf course, and some little fella in a thick tweed coat and a language and an accent I couldn't even understand a word he said showed me down to my locker. I got checked in, went out. I signed up for a tee time, and I'm on the putting green. So this beautiful grandstand is up there on the side. We're looking at the back, and I'm on the putting green, hit a few putts, and I'm just thinking to myself, there can't be anybody in Edmond, Oklahoma that can even imagine what I am so fortunate to be doing here. So I look up, and here comes a lady kind of walking toward me, looking at me, and very nicely dressed. And she says to me in a very South African or Australian, I didn't know at the time, accent, "Are you Danny Edwards?" I said, "Yes, I am." "Yes, ma'am." She says, "I noticed you had a spot on your starting time. We're here with a player also. Could he join you for a practice round?" I said, "Of course, no problem." And she said, "His name is Bobby Locke."
Mm.
And I thought to myself, Bobby Locke, that's the fella from South Africa that's supposedly the best putter in the world. And so I tee off with one, I can't remember his official name, but Bobby Locke, and away we go.
Mm.
So I get to watch this unbelievable, very diminutive fellow work his way around this great golf course. I think he won 4 of them, Mike, 3 or 4 British Opens. I didn't really know it at the time, but I watched him like a hawk on the greens, and I'd never seen anything like it. He had this stroke like a duck hook. His right foot was back. He had that Calamity Jane. He hooked the ball. And I remember like it was yesterday thinking that his golf ball had a magnet in it that was attracted to the hole. His ball went in the top of the hole. It went in the side of the hole. It went in the bottom of the hole. I had never seen anything like it.
They didn't putt like that at Kicking Bird?
I don't think there was anybody at Kicking Bird in Edmond putting like that. No. So what an unbelievable experience. If I wish I'd had a smartphone or a Sharpie or a piece of paper to get an autograph, but I didn't. But anyway, I played pretty good. In those days, we started on Wednesday. There were 2 rounds, and then the first cut, and then a cut on Friday for the final round. I made the first cut, 75-75, shot 71 on Friday, and then played again with Bruce Devlin, who I played with the first 2 rounds on Saturday, and shot 75, ended up finishing about 34th or 33rd, I think. But after the tournament, as well, what was interesting was on the first green, I got a really nice round of applause. And I thought, well, that's really nice. I hit a pretty good shot in there. Second hole, I didn't hit such a good shot, but I got a roaring clapping and ovation. And Bruce Devlin comes walking over. I must have looked kind of weird. He said, "Danny, they're clapping for you. These are very knowledgeable fans here in Scotland. They know you're low amateur. They'll probably do it on every hole." And sure enough, they did, every single hole. And when I got to about 100 yards of the 18th green, Mike, the entire grandstand stood up and gave me a standing ovation walking to the 18th green. I'm telling you, it gives me goosebumps now thinking about it. And then, of course,
expect that.
And, of course, got to sit on the 18th green and sit next to Tom Weiskopf, who was the winner, and Johnny Miller, I think, was on my right, and get up and receive my beautiful sterling silver medallion that I have in my office in a beautiful red velvet case, a little bit faded out now. But again, sitting there thinking to myself, there can't be anybody in Edmond, Oklahoma that can imagine what I'm getting to do here.
Well, Edmond, Oklahoma.
Here's a little piece of trivia. Sorry to
go ahead.
Trivia is it turns out that have been low amateur in a British Open and gone on to win a PGA Tour event. Those 6 men happen to be yours truly, Hal Sutton, Jose Maria Olazabal, one Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy, and Justin Rose.
Okay.
How about fast company?
That's pretty fast company. You cut out, but I assume you said that there have only been 6 guys who have been the low amateur at the Open Championship who went on to win on the PGA Tour. Is that what you said?
That's correct. Yes. And those 6 men are yours truly, Hal Sutton, Jose Maria Olazabal, Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy, and Justin Rose.
Pretty good statistic. I'm a golf historian. I didn't know that one, Danny, so thank you very much.
You bet.
So you played all 4 years at Oklahoma State. I believe, if I'm correct, you guys hosted the national championship your senior year at Stillwater Country Club.
That's correct.
And Ben Crenshaw is the last individual champion who finished over par, and it was at the Little Stillwater Country Club, which to me is amazing. I know the wind blew that week.
The wind blew, and Mike, the wind blew out of the east. Never blows out of the east in Oklahoma. We were like playing a new golf course, and so we did. And with that, we lost our home course advantage. But it was still a great year. We had a great team, and finishing third wasn't what we wanted. But Florida and Texas had some really good teams, really good players, and that was a little bittersweet, but still the end to really a great career at Oklahoma State University.
Well, as I recall, because I was a 13-year-old coming down to watch that tournament, I have been to about 30 NCAA championships, about 28. And wow. You can add up all the fans at all those other 28 championships, and probably not any more than were there at Stillwater Country Club. I think about 10,000 people showed up the last round.
Well, it was a big event. I just remember grinding away. I don't remember too much about the gallery, but it was so tough with that east wind that we weren't used to. It was just like playing a brand new golf course, and that's too bad. But we would have loved to have given Coach Harris a victory going out, but it just wasn't meant to be.
Okay, well, it happens. Well, I'm going to ask one question before we leave Oklahoma State. Labrinth Harris, to me, is an icon. He's a legend. There's so many great things about Labrinth, from the fact that he built a golf course by himself, with his just a little bit of help. And he coached at Oklahoma State for 27 years, was a really good player. What things did you take from Labrinth just as you spent those years with him?
Well, I think on the top of the list, Mike, is the tenacity of his competitive nature. He was a fighter. He was a winner. And, that was the only reason you went to a tournament. That was the only reason you went out to qualify, is to shoot the lowest score. He was a tremendous competitor. We'd give him a quarter, and if we beat him for 9 holes when we played with him, which was several times a week, he'd give us a new golf ball. And I'll tell you one thing: he even got the golf balls free, but he didn't give away very many golf balls. I can tell you that, because he would hole a 20 or 30 footer, Mike, or chip in on that 9th hole. I mean, like clockwork, to keep from losing that golf ball. But he was a disciplinarian. Although I don't even remember him ever saying anything about discipline. It just was expected at Oklahoma State to be on your best behavior on and off the golf course, to be focused and dedicated. And you were playing for yourself. You were playing for Oklahoma State University. And there was nothing accepted less than giving your best.
Well, he was a great coach, and actually gave my older brother Tim some golf lessons when Tim was coming up. And he produced just about as many tour players as any coach in the country, other than maybe Houston, Dave Williams. But yes, he had a lot of tour players, and a bunch of them were your teammates, and you ended up playing the PGA Tour. So let's talk about that real quick. You won 5 times in the PGA Tour, which I think you did that in about an 8-year period.
Yeah.
So you were definitely one of the top players that won on the tour for quite a while. You won one of those tournaments playing in the Walt Disney Team Championship with your brother David. So let's talk about that, because that had to be a great memory. I think you're the only brothers who have won a team championship on the PGA Tour in history, but I'm not positive, but I think you are.
Yeah. Mike, that was a great memory. My little brother, 5 years younger, almost, taking to the game. And, I have to be honest, I was away all the time. I was, always a step or two ahead of him through those years at Oklahoma State. He was in high school, and I was, of course, hell bent on building my game. And David was a little slower operator, which was different from me, but I tried to help him as much as I could, of course. And, so it was a fantastic thing for us to come out of Edmond, Oklahoma, with no golf background, and to be able to play at that stage and win a PGA Tour event together was just amazing. I mean, obviously, we didn't dwell on it too much. We were off the next week or two to the next PGA Tour event. But all through the years, I always think about that. And the last 9 holes, the last 18 holes, I can remember very well. David played super on the back 9, made 3 good birdies that really got us over the hump. And so it was a great experience we had together, and a situation, a tournament we really cherish.
That's wonderful. Well, your career was certainly, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it, but quite a lot of accomplishments that you had while you played the PGA Tour. But before we finish with that, I want to give a shout out to David right now. I know he's been struggling with his health recently with some cancer treatments and different things. So have you been able to talk to David lately?
Oh, yeah. We're actually staying, Mary and I are staying down with David and Johnny, and spent a lot of good time. And, he's a tough guy. He's doing the right things. And, we're just saying our prayers for him every day that works out. And, he's fighting hard, and we just wish him, of course, the very best for a great recovery.
Yeah. And your brother, David, he won 4 times on the tour. So between you guys have 9 PGA Tour victories, and he even won on the Champions Tour as well. So we want to wish David the best from Better Than I Found It for sure. David's somebody I've looked up to and got to spend a lot of time with in my 16 years at Oklahoma State, because he and Johnny lived there for most of that time. So we're saying our prayers down here in Waco as well.
You bet. That's very much appreciated.
You bet. Well, listen, I said that your junior golf career and the way you got to Oklahoma State was a little atypical, not normal, but you did something else that was pretty atypical as well. You were a PGA Tour player who won, but you were also a race car driver. Tell me where this need for speed came about, and how did this happen? I mean, you literally were a competitive race car driver.
Well, Mike, I was a kid that loved cars. I could tell you when I was 14, 15 years old, before I got a driver's license, every muscle car and sports car on the road. I knew the make and the model, the year, and I would holler out when I was riding in the backseat with Mom, there's a 66 SS396 Chevelle. And she would almost go off the road. She'd say, Danny, don't do that. But I knew all those cars. I loved the idea of going fast. And it was just something that I really enjoyed. So I knew that I would do some racing someday. I just knew I would. And so as time went on and I got some money, I started buying some cars. Now, I'm going to tell you a story that you're not going to believe, but it was the first really fast car I got, which happened to be a Corvette. And I don't know if you can put this on the air, but you can decide on that. I was a junior at Oklahoma State University driving an old beat up Volkswagen. And I come down to breakfast one morning, and the assistant athletic director sits down across from me, Louis Mann. And he said, Danny, you look like you lost your last friend. What's wrong? And I said, oh, Louis, I see all these football players and basketball players driving these hot rod sports cars. And I'm driving this old beat up Volkswagen, but I'm out representing Oklahoma State all over the country in the summers and school, blah, 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 tooting my horn. He says, well, you ought to go talk to Floyd Gass. Doesn't even know who I am. What are you talking about? He says, oh, no. He knows who you are. He follows you. He says, I'll get you and see if I can get you an appointment. So he gets up, comes back in 2 minutes, says, you've got an appointment with Floyd Gass at Iba Hall in 30 minutes. Go get yourself cleaned up and head over there. I said, what am I going to tell him? He said, just tell him what you told me. You're going to get out of school, graduate from Oklahoma State, be on the tour. You'll make some money, but you'd like to get a nice car now. So I said, well, all right. So I go over there. I go into Iba Hall. I see third floor, Floyd Gass, athletic director, Oklahoma State. So I climb up the stairs, knock on the door. Lady comes to the door, says, may I help you? I said, my name's Danny Edwards. I'm here to meet Mr. Gass. Oh, yes, Mr. Edwards, come on in. Mr. Gass is looking forward to seeing you. I thought you got to be kidding. So I go in, sit down, and I can hear him back in his office talking. I'd never met him before. So directly he gets up, comes walking out, says, Danny, sticks out his hand. It is so good to meet you. How are you doing? Just want to tell you how much we appreciate all you do for Oklahoma State University. You travel around the country and represent us so well. Come on in here to the office. Sit down. What can I do for you? I said, well, Mr. Guest, I know I'm going to be out of college after next year, my senior year, make some money. And I'd love to have a sports car, but I just don't have any money right now. He said, maybe we can help you out a little bit. He said, what kind of car were you thinking about? And I said, a Corvette. He goes, oh, a Corvette. I said, well, yeah, I like Corvettes and fast cars. So he picks up the phone, old rotary phone, dials a number. He said, George, this is Floyd. I've got a young man here, Danny Edwards. I'm going to send him down. I want you to take care of him. Hangs up the phone, writes out George Lucas, Senior Vice President, Stillwater National Bank. So I get in my old Volkswagen, drive down to the bank, go in there. Sure enough, I see on the window, Senior Vice President, Stillwater National Bank, George Lucas. Knock on the door. Lady comes to the door. May I help you? Danny Edwards is my name. Oh, yes. Mr. Lucas, looking forward to seeing you. So I go in, sit down in his office. He says, Danny, what can I do for you? I said, so I tell him my story. He says, all right. So he reaches down, Mike, to the lower bottom of his desk. Of course, there were no computers in those days. Pulls out this drawer and this great big, looks like a ledger checkbook. And he starts writing what looks like is his signature on the bottom of one of the checks. So he tears out the check, reaches across the table and hands me a blank check with his name signed on it. So I've got this check in my hand and I'm walking out. I'm standing on the front porch there of the bank, looking down at this blank check signed by the Senior Executive Vice President of Stillwater National Bank. And I'm going to get a new Corvette or a Corvette. So I've got to tell my parents the good fortune that has befallen me here. Certainly. Of course, we sell phones. So I've got to get in my Volkswagen and head to Oklahoma City, which I do. I tell my parents, and my dad says, you get back in that Volkswagen and drive back up to Stillwater and give that check back to that man. There's got to be strings attached. I said, Dad, I don't know what the strings might be, but I'm going to get a Corvette. So that wasn't the best part, the best time in our lives. We kind of didn't get along all that well before that. And so it didn't help anything. So anyway, down to Oklahoma City, didn't find anything, ended up with getting a car in Tulsa, a beautiful 1971 LT1 350, British racing, dark green, beautiful Corvette, 11,000 miles. I'll never forget. Drove it to Stillwater, went back down to see Mr. Lucas. And he said, Danny, here's what we're going to do. He says, now, do you have any money for repairs if something breaks? I said, no, sir, I don't. He said, do you have any money for insurance? I said, well, I hadn't thought about that. No. He says, well, here's what we're going to do. The car was $4,200. We're going to loan you $5,000, 6% simple interest, payable back when you pay $150 every 6 months. You think you can do that? I said, well, I think I can do that. Had no idea how I was going to do it. But I said I probably could do that. And so he said, you're on your way. So I walk out the door with my Corvette. I ended up putting over 100,000 miles on that car and paid off the loan my first year on the PGA Tour.
Wow, that is an ending to the story I did not expect. I expected NCAA scandal or what. I mean, that's good.
I did. I paid it off, but that was the beginning of my of my dream of having sports cars, Mike, for real. So I drove that car. Well, as a matter of fact, my first professional tournament was a team event in Nacogdoches, Texas, and Bill Rogers was my partner. It also had an individual piece, and Bill and I won the team part, and I won the individual. I believe it was $3,500. I got in my Corvette. I put the clubs in the passenger side. I put my big luggage trunk strapped down to the luggage rack in the back and headed to Houston with $3,500 check. And I thought I died and gone to heaven.
That's a good way to start.
Yep. So, and, just from there, the love for the cars continued.
That's good. Well, you had a need for speed for sure. And I'm going to ask a question because I heard a rumor a long time ago. So you're going to dispel the rumor or corroborate it, one or the other. Is it true that every year in January you'd put back $5,000 and just say, that's it, I'm going to drive as fast as I want? That $5,000 will take care of my speeding tickets for the year. Something along those lines. Tell me the truth.
Well, there might have been a recognition that I was going to get a fairly generous share of speeding tickets over the years. I don't know if I actually put that much money in, because I actually did pretty good evading those lawmen. And if you'll remember back in that time in the 70s and 80s, states didn't have reciprocal agreements. So if I got a ticket in California or Arizona or, wherever, Kansas or North Carolina, I'd put $5 in an envelope, send it off to them, and never hear from them again. So I didn't have to pay that much, but I did have one of the most unusual experiences ever happen, Mike, after getting a speeding ticket that I'd like to share with you.
Please do.
I was leaving San Diego from the Andy Williams tournament and was actually driving to Tucson to meet David and Lindy Miller to play a practice round in the Dean Martin Tucson Open. We had finished on Monday because of a rain out on Sunday afternoon, so there was no traffic, beautiful sunny sky and light traffic. So I just thought, let's put the pedal to the metal. The first time I got stopped was not too far out of San Diego, and the policeman said, "Listen, I don't really have you on my radar for a specific speed, but I know you've been going way over the speed limit. I'm giving you a ticket." I said, "Wait a minute, you can't give me a ticket. You don't even know how fast I was going." He said, "I know you were going fast." So he wrote me up for a ticket. I got a few more on the way to Tucson, and so I'm getting down to fairly close to Tucson. And I noticed in my rear view a very small car staying up with me. So I thought, oh, gee, I better slow down a little bit and see if I've got trouble here. So as I slowed down, I could then pick up some blue flashing lights in the front of this car. So I slowed down to about 75. I was running up there pretty good. And of course, he pulls me over. So I got out of the car, just kind of waited for him. He comes walking up, and the first thing he says is, "What in the world do you think you're doing?" And I said, "Well, officer, I'm just on the way to Tucson." He said, "My buddy in the force was going northbound and estimated your speed at 130 miles an hour." I said, "So?" He's going the other way. He said, "Get in your car. I'm taking you in to see the judge." I said, "Officer, come on. You only got me for 75. He says, "Get in your car. I'm taking you in to see the judge." So we drive into this little town called Eloy, Arizona. We go in at about 40 miles an hour. It seemed like it took us an hour and a half to get in there, 5 miles at the speeds I'd been going. So we go into the courtroom. We sit down, nobody else there. The bench for the judge is a little bit raised. And we sit there for probably 10 or 15 minutes. And finally the door opens. And out comes an elderly lady wearing a gray robe and walks over to the bench and sits down. So we stand up, of course. The officer is right by me. He's a great big fellow. And we wait for her she writes a little bit down, and then she looks up and motions for me to approach the bench. So I do. She says, "May I have your license, please?" So I gave her my license. And she says, "Mr. Edwards, what are you doing here in Arizona?" I said, "Your Honor, I'm on the way to Tucson for a golf tournament." She nodded her head. She said, "What kind of a golf tournament?" I said, "Well, it's actually the Dean Martin Tucson Open, Your Honor." She paused a little bit, looked down, looked back up. She says, "Are you a professional golfer?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, Your Honor, I am." So it was silent for a little bit longer. She writes a little bit. She looks up again. She says, "Oklahoma. Where do you live in Oklahoma?" I said, "Your Honor, I live in the Oklahoma City area, actually a little town named Edmond, Oklahoma." She nods a little bit. She says, have you ever heard of a golf course called Oak Tree Golf Club? Now, get this. I'm 1,000 miles from Oak Tree Golf Club in a little bitty town in Eloy, Arizona. I said, yes, ma'am. I live at Oak Tree Golf Course. I have a home there. She pauses for a little bit again and looks back up and says, do you know a man named Jack Freeman? I said, Your Honor, Jack Freeman is one of my neighbors. Judge Freeman and I play golf when I'm at home. I look over at the trooper, and his chin hit his chest about as hard as I could imagine. And the judge looks at me and says, Mr. Edwards, Mr. Freeman is my nephew. She says, she looks back down and writes a little bit in front of her. She motions me to come up, gives me my license. She says, Mr. Edwards, would you please just take it a little bit easier on our highways out here? I said, yes, Your Honor, I will, Your Honor. She says, and have a good tournament down in Tucson. She walks out the door. We waited till it closed. I turned around. I didn't say a word to the trooper, went back out, fired up the Ferrari, and away I went to Tucson. The downside was I was going to meet David and Wintley to play a practice round, and I didn't make it in time.
But you had a good story to tell.
I had a good story.
That's funny. Wow. Well, okay. So you dispelled the myth. You didn't actually put $5,000 down, but you did pay some parking or some speeding tickets for sure.
I did. I never did have any big ones because I always got it shut down before they got me. Nobody ever got me at 130 or 140. So I had some little ones and I had more than my share, but didn't break the bank.
All right. Well, that one's an unbelievable story that her nephew was one of your neighbors and he was a judge in Edmond. That's pretty amazing.
Unbelievable.
So I'm going to ask you a question. Is that story documented in your new book, Driven?
Oh, yes. Okay. It is.
Well, let's talk about that book because you recently have published a book called Driven, the Danny Edwards story. I'm really excited. My copy is not yet in, but I'm a reader, a voracious reader in golf. So I want to find out all about the book and find out how people can get it because I love your story. So talk to me about it.
Well, when COVID happened, I remembered that guys would always say to me, Edwards, you ought to write a book. You've raced cars. You've played professional golf. You were an athlete growing up. You won races. You've got a whale of a story. You've been a businessman. You've taken the company public. You ought to be writing a book. So when COVID happened, I sat down, Mike, and just started writing for about 3 months. And I wrote the manuscript, and I got a fella to read it and to, do the corrections that needed to be done. I called up the publisher of Brandel Chambly's book, The Anatomy of Greatness, called Classics of Golf, a fellow named Michael Beckerich, and told him my story. He said, well, send me a copy of the manuscript. I'll take a look at it. He called back and said, I like the story. I like the story a lot. We'll publish it. So we went through the process then of finding a person to write the opening, which Johnny Miller agreed to do, which was fantastic. We contacted, Jaime Diaz and Rick Riley and Rick Mears and Roger Penske and Walt Zarnicki, people that I had spent a lot of time with, a good bit of time and in the racing and whatnot. And they all were so nice and generous to write little opening comments about our times together. And so it was released about 3 weeks ago. It's called Driven, the Danny Edwards story. And it's just a compilation of the experiences that I encountered over the years, meeting Roger Penske in Reading, Pennsylvania during the IVB Philadelphia Golf Classic, probably in about 1977 or 8. Roger showed us all around the race shop. We were so excited that the drivers were wanting to get our autographs and the crew. And of course, we were wanting to get Rogers and Rick and Danny Sullivan and Mears and all those guys. And Roger invited me to come down to his office. And he said, Danny, do you play in the Crosby? And I said, oh, I love the Crosby at Pebble Beach. I love it. He said, do you have a partner? And I said, no, not really. He said, would you like to play together? And so for 10 years, Roger and I got to play in the Bing Crosby, and I got to spend a lot of time with the captain. In fact, the first chapter of the book is me and the captain. So it's just a compilation, Mike, of stories about those things, about my racing. I'm probably the only guy that's ever won a national American race, road race, and gone the next day to Houston, Texas to play in the PGA Tour event. And I would sit there in the golf cart or walk with my caddy thinking there's not a guy here that has any idea what I did yesterday. So it's really a lot of fun, a lot of stories, and I'm really pleased. It also has a finish with the TPA, which was a very interesting time in my life that now is kind of coming back to the forefront as we're seeing some of the issues with the PGA Tour and the other tours, and full exposure, if you will, of situations. So it's a very good, interesting read.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting my copy. And how do people get it? They go on Amazon to get that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's on Amazon. You can go to classicsofgolf.com and order it right there from the publisher. It's on Amazon and Kindle. Kindle, okay. You can get it on Kindle, and there's even one that is a voice. I think it's a voice thing, but those are the primary sources.
That's great. Well, I'm like I said, I'm a big golf reader. I love golf history, and I really love reading about people that I know. So I'm looking forward to reading that, and I'll make sure once I've read it to make sure a lot of my friends get a copy of it as well. So,
thank you, Mike. Thanks. That'd be great.
Absolutely. Well, tell me what's on the horizon for you. I mean, I know you've written this book. You're probably going to be doing some promoting of that. Are you still playing much? What's on the horizon for you? In the short term.
Thank you for asking. I still play a little bit. I really don't compete much of it anymore, except just myself. Mike, as you probably know, I started a program called the Chipping Equation about 4 years ago because all of my time on the tour, I enjoyed playing with the amateurs on the Wednesday Pro-Ams, but I agonized over their inability to chip. Mm-hmm. And so I watched them closely. I would ask them, okay, how are you going to play this shot? And it was just deer in the headlights or a guess. And even to the players that are on a more competitive basis, it's just a guess. And so they practice and they just guess where you're going to land it. I would ask them, they'd say, well, about halfway. Okay, what club do you use? I use my 56, my 58. So I had a notion, and my belief was that the lofted wedges are inconsistent. And so it was just my opinion, but I had a very interesting thing happen. Mary and I were in Lake Placid about 4 summers ago, and a young man showed up at the golf course in Lake Placid Golf Club. And when I came in, he looked right at me, and in a very much of an accent, he said, "Danny, my name is Ronnie. I'm from Denmark. I'm a PGA teaching professional in Denmark. And I can drive the ball beautifully and I can putt beautifully, but I cannot chip. I want you to teach me to chip. I've enrolled in your class." So I said, well, let's go see what we can do, Ronnie. So we got the group, went out there. An hour and a half later, I said, what do you think, Ronnie? He said, Danny, this is unbelievable. This is what I've always wanted to find, a simple method to be able to accurately calculate a landing spot and a predictable rollout, so the ball will finish close to the hole. So we've become good friends. We've communicated back and forth. And so a few months after that, Mike, I got in touch with Ronnie again. I said, listen, you told me you were one of the 3 original calibrators of the TrackMan system. Did TrackMan ever do an analysis of chipping? And he said, no, we didn't. I said, would you consider it? He said, we would love to do an analysis of chipping. So I commissioned the first ever TrackMan analysis of chipping in Denmark, going on 4 years ago. And the final statement of analysis, Mike, was, quote, with swing speeds below 30 miles an hour and lofts above 45 degrees, the ball starts rolling up the face, skidding across the face, compromising spin rate, launch angle, and quality of strike, end quote. There it was in black and white. Lob wedges are inconsistent by design. With the hard golf balls we use today and those high lofts, there's not enough compression to get the ball to stay on the grooves. So we've all hit those pitch shots around the greens that we were trying to land at maybe 8 or 10 steps, and it goes about 6 or 5. And so now we know why. So with that information, Mike, I did some research studying the lofts of clubs and found out that a pitch and wedge and an 8-iron have a very simple but perfect carry and rollout formula that makes it very easy to chip a ball to an intermediate spot with a predictable rollout. So the chipping equation has evolved now with hundreds of students. I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma today, Broken Arrow, and I just had 2 groups of people, 4 groups over the last 2 days, and the reaction from the people is just unbelievable. They said, Danny, this is unbelievable. This is what I've always wanted to be able to find, a way to make chipping simple. Here's an amazing thing, Mike. I have a very good friend who is a bowler, was a professional bowler, who is also a PGA golf professional. I said to Bobby a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, I said, Bobby, let me ask you something. When you're bowling, what is your target? Is it the pins? I said, how far are the pins away? He said, they're 60 feet away. He says, we don't even look at the pins. I said, what are you talking about? What do you look at? We look at the arrows on the lane. There's 7 arrows on the lane, 5 steps away from your line. He says, we look at the arrows. Here we are. Everybody knows chipping is a challenge for everyone. Anyone other than a very good player struggles mightily with chipping. And we are asking these people, Mike, to look out 50, 60, 70, 80 feet and somehow guess where to land that golf ball so it will roll up by the hole. You have got to be kidding me. The chipping equation allows the golfer to calculate a very short 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 or 8 on the outside landing spot based on a flat 10 to 11 stemp green, and the rollout is predictable. So the ball will finish within 2 or 3 or 4 feet of the hole. We all know if you don't chip the ball within 3 or 4 or 5 feet of the hole, you're not going to make a high percentage of the putts. And it is the one place, though, where everybody can have success because it doesn't require great athleticism. It doesn't require great hand-eye coordination. It certainly doesn't require great strength. But what it requires is a formula and the benefits of horizontal momentum. If a golfer has a clear path from their ball to the cup, there is no question whatsoever that playing the ball on the ground with a formula for a specific landing spot and a predictable rollout is the highest percentage way to get that ball close to the hole.
You know, it's funny. You've got this equation that now you can put numbers to, and you've used TrackMan to get to it. Pretty much, my dad used to talk about this when I was a kid. He wanted me to get the ball on the ground rolling like a putt sooner rather than later. He didn't want me to use the lofted clubs. So this is something I've known for 50 years. I just didn't have anything like your numbers to put behind it.
Right. That's exactly right. I mean, what's the most consistent golf club in our bag, Mike?
Yeah, as far as the putter, without question.
Because it's on the ground. We have complete control of it. Why wouldn't we want to get the ball on the ground rolling like a putt as soon as possible? Now, what also you need to have, and what the chipping equation system has, is a set of modifications. So let's say you have a short side situation. You're 18 steps, 18 yards from the flagstick, but you're 12 steps to the edge of the green. Okay? So the chipping equation gives you a formula to calculate how far you need to land the ball before it gets to the green. Okay? So if you land the ball X amount and you look at the spot and it's light rough or fairway, you land the ball on that spot, you have calculated, you make an adjustment to allow for the fact that the golf ball is going to slow down in the fairway grass or the light rough before it gets to the putting surface. You can measure that. You can calculate that. So you add a step or two if it's going to slow down. If you have a real fast green or a downhill shot, you can pull that basic spot back a step or two to allow for the extra rollout of the chip. Remember, the golf ball only knows one thing: how much energy is put to it. Mm-hmm. So you can calculate a landing spot for a ball that has to hit on a false front, go up onto the green. The pin is cut in a plateau on the back right of the green. The golf ball doesn't know what the terrain is. The golf ball only knows where you landed and how much energy it has. So you can play balls to places on the ground with amazing accuracy, with horizontal momentum, which is your friend.
I have a question for you. That's all incredible information. Did you instinctively know this when you were playing the tour? I mean, is this something you kind of always had in chipping?
It was. I don't know where I got it first, Mike, but I recognized very early on that getting the ball, like your father told you, getting the ball on the green, rolling like a putt was the right way to chip. But I didn't really have a formula. I just kind of guessed like everybody did in those early years. But as time went on, I started to realize that, this is pretty predictable. And there ought to be a way to calculate how to land the ball, where to land the ball, and then modify it if you needed to. So it's incredibly simple. I just taught two ladies this morning, a couple hours ago, and their faces are just unbelievable. They said, we are so happy with this. And those of us like you that love the game of golf, people struggle mightily. We have people that quit the game of golf who can't chip. And so my mission, to answer your question, where do I go from here, is if I can do it, I would like to change the culture in our game, in the short game. TrackMan proved what we thought. Lob wedges are flawed. There's no compression. But the chipping equation and chipping with less loft clubs and two clubs, it's got to be simple. It's got to be very simple for people. So we have two clubs, two formulas. And we're on a mission here. We're getting some great things to happen. Great testimonials from people. I had a coach from a Division II school in Palm Beach Gardens call me 4 or 5 months ago and said, "Danny, would you come out and talk to my team?" I said, "Of course I would." So I went out. His men's and women's team had about 30 students there, maybe 25 students. And so I told him a little bit about the chipping equation that evening. And so he called me the next day and said, my kids would like you to come out and teach them the chipping equation. I said, "Of course I would." As you know, Mike, he couldn't be there while I was teaching him this school. So he brought him back to the back of the range in groups of 6. I think I had 5 groups of 6. And I taught him only 30 minutes. I spent 30 minutes with each group. He called me the next day and said, "Danny, every one of my players is switching to the chipping equation." I can just go on and on with the stories. I have a young lady who is trying to get on the Symetra tour. I've given her 2 lessons. The first one, she called me right after she left. She says, "I'm going to play golf today. I'm going to use your system, and I'm going to use it every single round of golf I play the rest of my life." She called a few weeks later and she said, "Danny, I was 100% up and down today." Mm. She called another time and she says, "Danny, I'm having something happen here out on my tour that I've never had before." I said, "What's that?" She says, "Girls are coming up to me and saying, 'Josie, what in the world has happened to you? Your chipping is unbelievable. It's different. What did you do?'" So, of course, I love that, and the testimonials from others. The guys on the golf team there are loving it. Their best player on their team switched, and the coach said to me, "Danny, the thing I can't believe is how fast these students changed. They changed the next day." and they're loving the system.
Probably the simplicity, but gosh, that's great to hear. You've always impressed me as a guy that's always trying to figure out better ways of doing things. And so this doesn't surprise me one bit that you'd be doing that. And I am really excited about reading your book. So when my copy comes in this week, I'll let you know what I think. But Danny, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Mike, it's my pleasure. It's great to visit with you. Congratulations on your success down there. It's well-deserved, and those guys down there are lucky to be working with you as their coach.